Welcome to Engel Rounds for April. And today is going to be a really interesting presentation. We have E.J. Santos, Corey Nichols-Hadeed, and Brittany Mott to talk about using community-based participatory research to inform the creation of a new geriatric forensic program. And one of the reasons I'm excited about this is because we have a big initiative in our department to try to get measurement-based care into our clinical programs and to integrate research and clinical work. And this, I think, is a good example of what that can look like. So that will start shortly, but I just wanted to make a few routine announcements before we hear about the program. First, if you're watching this on Zoom, then just know that your cameras are off and your microphone is off. And also, don't use the chat box to send messages to anybody here. That's reserved for the interpreters and the panelists and the people behind the scenes. But we hope people have questions and comments at the end. And if you do, please put those in the Q&A box. And I'll be reading those off to the presenters in the last few minutes of our session today. And last but not least, please fill out the evaluation of the session today. And you'll get a link to that on a slide at the very end. It'll also be sent out in the chat at the end. And if you're here, there'll be a QR code that comes up on the screen, and you can just take a picture of that with your phone, and it'll take you right to the evaluation. All right, so normally I do a long introduction of a speaker, but as I was joking to them, I'm just going to say today, you know them, you love them, and now here they are.
Thanks so much, Steve.
All right.
Hey, everybody. Okay. All right. So I'm E.J. Santos. I am the clinical chief for the Division of Geriatric Mental Health and Memory Care, and I'm going to talk about some stuff that hopefully you know and love, but you're going to learn a lot more about how we are using clinical acumen in a research setting and how we want to move the field forward. All right. Oh, there we are. Okay. So we don't really have any relevant financial relationships. I've gotten a lot of funding from different grant mechanisms. And Dr. Mott receives money from the Department of Child and Family Services, which you're going to hear about. But we really wanted to thank everybody especially in the department, especially Dr. Lee, Dr. Silverstein, Yates, Kate Cerulli, Kate Pogorski, Patrick Sesh, Eric Kane, actually, who helped do a lot of this work initially, Rob Weissman, Dr. Ciccone, Kim Van Orden, and some administrative help from Judy Schaefer, Megan Ailes, and Janine Thompson. So what I'm going to start off talking about is our history of collaboration in the department in terms of research and identifying needs. So hopefully some of you remember the SHARE Alliance that Yates Conwell and Carol Podgorski got funding for. I think it was like $5 million in the early 2000s. They started working with Lifespan in the late 90s, okay, and developed this whole alliance with Lifespan, which is the largest aging services organization in our area. They cover like 14 counties. And we started looking at what do people need in the community in terms of services for older adults. How are we identifying their needs, specifically mental health needs, but also training practitioners in the area. I forgot to mention Dr. Deb King. She was the head of education for the SHARE Alliance, and training people to do the work of identifying, at the time it was a lot of depression in the community. There are still parts of the SHARE Alliance that continue to this day, and we are definitely an offshoot of this program. I just came about at the right time. When I started here at the university, I was going to do clinical work only, and I got very excited going to these meetings, figuring out what the gaps were in service delivery for older adults in the region. And because of the partners in the Share Alliance, I was able to tap into Lifespan's elder abuse prevention program, right? We're gonna talk a lot about CBPR, which is community-based participatory research, and this is where I learned to do it. Because of my work with the Share Alliance, somehow I was identified as this person who knows a lot about elder abuse, and at this time I was still a fellow. I graduated from an interdisciplinary geriatrics fellowship, which was psychiatry, medicine, and dentistry, and I was so fascinated by the work of the partners that Dr. Eric Kane and Dr. Yates Conwell had me do a T32 research fellowship. I don't know if a lot of you know that I actually did a postdoc research fellowship, and I got my master's in public health after 2 years of clinical fellowship. So I was in training for a very long time, but it was totally worth it, which I hope you will agree after you see what all of that work has led to. So in the middle of my T32, I was tapped to be an advisory board member for this study we called Under the Radar, the New York State Elder Abuse Prevalence Study. This was the first study of a whole state ever about how much identifying cases of elder abuse, and we did it in a very, I like to say, I think it was a very elegant design. We oversampled some of the rural populations because we were doing this in conjunction with Weill Cornell, sorry. Dr. Lax always said I had to say Weill first. They paid a lot of money. So Weill Cornell was running the downstate part, and we were running the upstate part, the rest of the state. And we wanted to make sure we were gathering data from people in rural communities, right? Because there are a lot of services that they have in New York City, right? That the Department for the Aging, the DFTA they call it, have as well that we don't have, right? I've said it many times before that there are a lot of geriatric psychiatry programs downstate, but we're the only one upstate. So they really did rely on us to kind of set the stage for them in terms of everything else that's outside of New York City. And what we were able to do is correlate. We did calls, actually. So there was, of course, a limitation in that we only were able to gather data from people who had phones, right? So, but these were landlines, this is back in the day a little bit. And we called people all over the state. We actually had even Chinese, Mandarin, I think we did, Spanish speaking. We did it in different languages, but we sampled every county in New York State. And then we correlated the data with reports of elder abuse from APS, district attorneys, all the services, police, and state police and local police in every county in New York State. And sadly, what we found was really a high rate of abuse, all kinds of abuse throughout New York State, okay? And what was very interesting is that financial exploitation was identified in only one of every 24 cases that we identified. So meaning to say that only one case was actually brought to the DA or brought to the police. There was an investigation, it was identified, where when we called 24 people, they were like, oh no, we're being abused, or money's being taken from us. But only one case was being followed through, reported, and we weren't really surprised by the data. We were just kind of shocked, I think, by the number. I mean, 1 in 24 was very significant to us. So, in the middle of my T32, working with the prevalence data and also with the gerontology group at Cornell, being a geriatric psychiatrist, I was really interested in, well, also prevention, right? And the dyad of perpetrator and victim, okay? So adapting, we've all seen these socio-ecological models, right? I was creating a study to figure out, how do people become perpetrators? How do people become victims? And where can we intercede, especially in terms of mental health, right? So using this as kind of the base of where I was thinking everything was going. I mean, we had, things that we wanted to see in terms of like court services, perceptions and ageism, different kind of relationships, right? Because we're thinking about the dyad between victim and perpetrator. And also, of course, socio-demographics and frailty on the individual sides, right? For both perpetrator and victim. I got a little bit waylaid, because I think at this time I started running CPEP. And so I started moving a little bit away, but always in my heart keeping this idea of, we need research to really move the bar and figure out what are the things that we can do. But the research we did have was that prevalence study. So we used that data with our partners at Lifespan to create, to go after this grant. It actually, again, it's fortuitous timing. We got National Institute of Justice funding, managed by the Office of Victim Services and the Office for the Aging, to start enhanced multidisciplinary teams, or E-MDTs, right? And the reason we chose this is because of that prevalence study. Because of a lot of ageist views, people don't get prosecuted, they don't prosecute elder abuse because they think that the older adult maybe has dementia, they're not good, people to testify, they can't, everyone says, oh yeah, no, he told me, but he can't remember because he has dementia. But with financial exploitation, there is a paper trail, right? We wanted to make sure that people were treating elder abuse as a crime, right? And so even if we have somebody who maybe isn't a great witness because of dementia or cognitive impairment, since the wheels of justice are sometimes slow, it might be a couple years till something goes to the court, that banks, credit card companies, other people can actually get restitution for them. And that's why we focus on financial exploitation. We call this enhanced multidisciplinary teamwork because there was a forensic accountant, right? You cannot go to court and get restitution for people without showing the money trail. So we have a forensic accountant and a geriatric psychiatrist, which is me, and as well as access to community legal services. And this was about 10 years ago we started this, and you're gonna see now where all that has led. And Corey Nichols is gonna take the story from here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I wanna start just by thanking Dr. Silverstein for giving us this forum, and me as an emerging researcher that has followed a more non-traditional path that I'll talk about, for giving me this forum to share the work I really believe in with my clinical colleagues. I think this work's important. I think work with the community is important and can really enhance our clinical services. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I also want to thank Dr. Santos for the history. I think we have something really, really special to share with you today. Not only did EJ do a beautiful job setting up the long-standing research and history with the community that we're basing our current work on, I'm also going to share with you data for developing a capacity clinic, which has never been done before in the country that we know of. And we've looked and we've tried to find models. And I also think the exciting special thing we have to offer today is my colleague, Dr. Mott, will follow up with how we plan to make research a cornerstone of our work. The patients and family are the heart, but we know the research to serve them well. So thank you so much. So some of you know me, some of you don't, And how did I get here, I think is an important story to start with, because it's not your traditional path, but I'm really proud of the work that I do here. Some of you that do know me might not know that my background actually is in bench science. I was a biochemistry major in undergrad. I did extensive work in food engineering and, really had my sights on going into the PhD program and the research track. So I love research, it's my foundation. A lot of you know, whether you want to know or not, how much I love the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, which reviews all the research being done at U of R. So after I got my undergraduate degree, I went on to work at an institutional review board and really enjoyed the work and was exposed to all kinds of research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. So I really got my, research sea legs going there. I came back to Rochester and was a research consultant for many years, and the law bug got me. And I just really felt the need to go to law school. And I was interested in patent and trademark along the vein of research. However, my world changed for the positive when I met Dr. Kate Cerulli and was introduced to her Laboratory of Interpersonal Violence and Victimization, where I was introduced to community-based participatory research and the link between court involvement and mental health. And so it really married my interest in research, science, and legal advocacy. And my heart, knowing that I could directly impact patient care, spoke to my heart. So I came to the University of Rochester Medical Center in the Department of Psychiatry almost 15 years now, according to LinkedIn, just to learn more about research for a temporary position. And as I just stated, it's now been 15 years. So EJ and I met. She gave kind of her trajectory and her research background. We actually met at the Laboratory of Interpersonal Violence and Victimization. We had a shared goal of addressing elder abuse and all forms of violence. Some of you don't know this, but we actually helped launch the first mental health services at the Hall of Justice. EJ was the medical director. I was a research associate, and we worked closely to try to provide on-site services for court-involved individuals. Unfortunately, that work, the funding streams and the sustainability relied heavily on residents, didn't pan out, but we've actually been talking for about 10 years about the data we collected. We have a lot of data. We learned a lot about our court-based users. So that led to the more honed in, focused on capacity evaluations. So EJ and I were talking about the research, talking about the court medical clinic, and we're like, this access to capacity evaluations just doesn't seem to be panning out in the real world. We're seeing a lot of inequities in access and vulnerable populations not being seen at all. So we started writing and talking about it and researching about it. We wrote 2 book chapters on the ethical reasons why we need to elevate this clinical issue and why we need to research it and explore it more. And some of our rationale behind the ethical considerations were, how important is autonomy for a patient, especially an older adult who's experiencing changes in their lives? And I learned a lot about, not discounting the older adults in our community and the value that they bring. And how can we enhance services so that we can enhance their contribution to society and to our community? And that just helps everyone across the lifespan. So we talked about the importance of autonomy. So having these capacity evaluations so that we know that, older adults may not have the capacity for some decisions, but they may have it for others. I also learned a lot about the difference between the way the legal field looks at capacity is kind of more of a definite. And then I learned a lot about how the medical field, it's a snapshot in time. And the way EJ was doing her assessments were very different than I had explored capacity as in my legal training and as a lawyer. So we talked and talked, and we started presenting at conferences, and Brittany joined our team, and she'll talk more about her work. And we realized that people wanted this. People were cheering for us, and this was across the board. Ooh, we're not advancing here. Okay, well, I could talk about this all day, but I really don't want to. Steve, help us. Well, it's okay, because the start of our next slide really was about talking to people, so this is, oh dear, now we're at the end.
Now it's ready. Okay, there. Yeah, no. Oh, does it carry to it?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it working now?
I don't know. Somehow it worked. So, so discussions with key stakeholders was kind of the start. I talked about the equity of access issue that was coming up, and how many older adults were not getting access to capacity evaluations. And if they were, it wasn't timely or necessarily being helpful. So we talked to families, clients, patients, the E-MDT that EJ mentioned. Brittany and I would go to bar association meetings and talk to lawyers. And we really started to discuss, if we were to do a small research project, what are some of the questions we'd want to ask? And what would we want to know specifically to shape the clinical services, which goes back to, the mission Steve talked about. How can we use this data to really make change? We had many, many discussions with the Office of Counsel, the Compliance Office and Billing, not specifically related to the research, but we definitely have been taking diligent notes because we're creating something new. So there were a lot of logistics to work out, and no one at U of R would be surprised by that. So where would it be housed? It had to be housed in memory care. How can we set up billable, sustainable processes? So we consider that all research. So we have taken notes. We want to be a model for other communities and other medical centers, and we're collecting that as data. So the next slide, however we're advancing this magically, was a needs assessment data collection. Oh, there we go. So another thing that I will come back to is this concept of community-based participatory research. And we do talk about it at the medical center. And again, I'm grateful for this forum, but I think it's really a game changer for us, being in a clinical mixed team. So we actually revisited the guiding principles for community engaged research. And this is provided in consultation with the CTSI across the street. Long-term engagement, check. We went back through our history. We went back through our data. Mutual benefit. We want to benefit our partners, patients, families, us, our services. We want to feel good about what we do. We also do want some academic product, and we want to be able to write and present about this. And we want to do diligent data analysis to prove what we're doing is working or not working, and that we need to make a change. We want to share the findings. As you can see, we've been out and about a lot. We continue to plan to do that. I hope we'll be back at a grand rounds showing even more of our data analysis once we get rolling. We're really here. If you haven't noticed, our values are really about increasing community engagement with clinical services, including capacity clinic. We feel a shared responsibility. Again, research. We want an evidence base. We do want sophisticated statistics supporting us. We want it collaborative from start to finish, including you all and the department. We feel very supported in this work, and we need that ongoing support. And I do feel that after all the talking we did and the survey I'm about to share, that we are responding to community priorities and perspectives, as well as values and priorities that have been identified to us by hospital leadership. So I don't know, I'm biased. I think we're checking all the boxes, doing okay. We of course have stuff more to learn. Next slide. So, of course, I ran right to the IRB because I love them to discuss what a research study would look like. So we settled on a needs assessment of capacity evaluation services across New York State. We're using the data to design a capacity clinic, and as I mentioned, it'll be part of the Division of Geriatric Mental Health and Memory Care at UR Medicine. Again, there is no known model for this, so we are kind of building the plane as we fly it, but we're being careful. So the Research Subjects Review Board, which is the U of R's IRB, approved this as exempt from continuing review. And just a little IRB education, exempt from continuing review means we don't have to report in every year, but it still is research. It's not non-research. And if anything changes where we might be doing something non-exempt, we need to check in. So if we start linking to court data or using different identifiers, check in with the IRB, no problem. We'll just have to, change our trajectory. We use an information sheet for informed consent, and we collected the survey data on REDCap. It's a very brief survey, only 5 to 10 minutes. It's translational science, and we did have a requirement that all our participants must be 18 or older and serve over adults over 60. The survey was also anonymous. So, results. We kind of were checking in when we first got the data set, kind of completed an end. Did we cover the bases we wanted to cover? We kind of sent this out widely. We tried to use our community partners. They were really helpful. And we did end up reaching 67 individuals from law firms, advocacy agencies, law enforcement. The district attorney's office in Monroe County participated. The New York State Office of Aging helped us out. We had the county government, adult protective services and social services, and financial institutions and emergency departments. So I would say, we covered our ground. Again, this is kind of a needs assessment across all kinds of stakeholders. Luckily, of course, all 67 had served patients 60 years and older, or else they wouldn't have been allowed to continue. But just putting it in there is kind of a quality check. Every single one of our survey participants said they worked with older adults who have an annual income less than $25,760. And at that time, that was the cutoff for the 200% of the federal poverty line. And that's important for us, our social workers, and our providers to know that this group of individuals has financial need and will be eligible and should be linked to resources. So very important part. Patients, another important thing we learned was that, and we felt this way before, but we needed to do research to really confirm this, that clients were from across the community. This is a statewide survey. We had suburban, rural, and urban clients, and quite a bit of rural. And I think that's where the E-MDT program fills some of the gaps. So we really got a good read on who we were going to be serving as part of this capacity clinic. Now, these are very simple statistics, but they were very fun to look at and were very meaningful in developing the capacity clinic. So we had talked to people and had kind of created this top 10 list of capacity evaluations. And what the survey really helped us do was identify the highest need capacity evaluations. Because for us to really, as a clinical service, think about serving everyone and everything, we would have just flopped. We would have been unable to accommodate that or sustain that. So we learned a lot about the type of evaluations: financial decision-making, guardianship, living independently, medical decision-making, and advanced directives rose to the top. And I don't think that'll surprise a lot of you here, but being able to see that in a graph with percentages and hone in on that was so valuable. Once we did that, we were able to create an enhanced referral order right in the e-record specific to capacity clinic. So we could be prepared for these specific capacity evaluations to collect the information we needed. Because getting an appointment is difficult, but getting an appointment and not having what you need is not helpful. So we were really able to hone in, get that e-record prompt for the referring providers to help us get in touch with the people that would have the information needed for these types of evaluations. Getting the collateral contacts is critically important for this type of work. We also were able to exclude criminal justice related evaluations. These would have been challenging to say the least in a clinic, but when we also realized the need was very specialized, we were able to also kind of get that off our plate and really hone in and focus on some change-making areas. So there were some other results that we plan to expand upon and research further and really told us some stuff. And there was a high percentage in those who experienced a delay in finding a provider. That did not surprise us, but the percentage was a little shocking. It's very, very high. And the percentage of 43% not being able to attain an evaluation doesn't seem like a shocking number at first, maybe, but it really is. That's hundreds and hundreds of older adults that do not even get the opportunity to have a life-changing evaluation. We also, we're learning with the times and with the COVID pandemic and all about the benefits of being creative and how do we use technology to serve our patients. So we took note that many people were working with patients and clients through video streaming, but there was room for improvement. So we feel like we, again, community-based participatory research, just starting to build this program that, we felt validated that there was a need across New York State for enhanced access to clinical services and education about capacity evaluations. The data supported all the anecdotal comments from stakeholders, and I also think there's a great opportunity for research to advance this field and for trainees to get involved and learn that, you may think, I would just want to be a clinician, serve my patients, but this is easy, doable teamwork, and I hope that we get more young trainees interested in research. We also were very aware that there's a rural need and that there would be, we'd really have to be thinking about expansion of telehealth use and education for stakeholders. And that there really needs to be more strategy and probably more of a push for funding around rural specific initiatives. This thing does not like me. I drained the battery. Is there a way to advance? Well, I think this was just also the universe saying it's Brittany's turn, so.
Nope, there. Maybe it has to be over. Or should you?
Is there a button?
Nope.
I mean, we'll just end early if we can't figure that out. Wait, sorry, I wasn't listening. Which button?
Well, I don't know if I have.
That's any button. All right. Okay, so my name is Brittany Mott. I am a triple board certified psychiatrist, which sounds really cool to say out loud. I did my residency here and both fellowships in forensics and geriatrics here. And there's a reason I stayed is because I get to work with these lovely people and there's a lot of opportunity for research. So the first piece of things is developing this geriatric forensic psychiatry program. So this is essentially using this background in geriatric psychiatry and training to complete more specialized evaluations, and then it overlaps with the forensic context of that legal issue in the elderly population, and then writing a very thorough report on your medical opinion and findings. So this is really important because a lot of the issues we deal with capacity, essentially a lot of them we're taking rights away from people. So it's a pretty big deal, and the more training you have and the more education you have around these topics, it's definitely necessary. All right, so happening now, we have launched the Capacity Clinic April 2023, which is exciting. It's been forever in the making. So what we're doing with that is ongoing data collection and evaluation. So we have created a comprehensive evaluation that includes psychiatric background, medical background. I think that's my next slide. So we're using these templates for data collection, research, quality improvement. And then the next piece of things that they have already touched on is expanding the E-MDT programs. And there's a slide I will get to with that. And this is hopefully going to allow ongoing research, program development, and funding. So the capacity evaluation process, we spent a lot of time making a comprehensive evaluation and assessment. So what we're doing with that is there's your basic psychiatric history, if you're connected to resources, medical history, social history, but something that's a little different when we start to do geriatric assessments is we really focus in on how people are functioning at home. So we have a section about activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living. We do cognitive screening, mental status exam, Montreal cognitive assessment. This is really important because I think a lot of referrals come to us with this diagnosis of dementia. And I think one of the first things you have to do as a medical provider is actually confirm any diagnosis that comes to you. So a lot of the times people will come with certain diagnoses and you're like, whoa, that is not correct. So it's always good to have this data, right, when you're doing your assessments. And then specific evaluations will come to us with the referral, so financial decision-making, guardianship. Those specific criteria are addressed in the actual evaluation, but again, it's this comprehensive evaluation, making sure we're not missing things. And then we give a DSM diagnosis, and other things we're tracking is safety. So we're going through all the things we worry about with safety as people age. Do they wander? All your basic suicidal, homicidal things. And then also what makes this a little different than other capacity evaluations we see maybe in the hospital, can they leave AMA? This is more comprehensive. So someone might come to us, oh, can they make financial decisions? But as you're going through the assessment, you're like, hey, wait, I don't think you can really make medical decisions either. I think your med list is really crazy and maybe we should try to streamline some of that because a lot of medications can have a lot of cognitive side effects. So not only are we giving recommendations tailored specifically to the question we're being asked, but also maybe recommending some other resources, home health aides, physical therapy, occupational therapy. There's a lot of resources in the community. And then, so these are different things I have in the comprehensive evaluation. We're asking everyone, do you have a healthcare proxy? Do you have a power of attorney? Do you have a will in place? And these are really important things because if we screen, say someone comes to us, there's a bit of a mild cognitive impairment. It doesn't mean when you don't have capacity for one thing that you don't have capacity across the board. So it's always good to assess if these things are in place because if someone does end up having a neurodegenerative memory process, at some point they might lose the ability to make these decisions. So these are also things we want to make sure are in place ahead of time, more of preventative. Then we're also tracking how much time it takes to do an evaluation. Something that's really important with forensic evaluations and just comprehensive evaluations is making sure we have collateral, making sure we have records, and making sure we're documenting what we reviewed. Oh, did I miss one? So just expected outcomes, identifying areas, medical and legal, that we could be doing better, seeing what we could be putting in place to maybe prevent things from getting to a capacity evaluation. Our goal at the end of the day is not to do 1 million of these. A lot of times it's kind of sending things back, being like, hey, have you tried these things before we actually do these assessments? So eventually this goes into policy and billing when we have data, and future directions is studies linking medical and court records. I think Corey can follow up on there. So one of the other things is the E-MDT expansion history. So in 2016, I don't really need to read the slides. I'm assuming you can all read here. So New York State expanded elder abuse and prevention. Yeah. you want me to read these slides? I don't know what we are in time.
The reason that this was important was only because people usually ask me, how did you get funding for this? Because they're very, it's a very new system that we have. And New York State, because of the work that I talked about earlier, based on actually that prevalence study, found that our E-MDT initiatives were able to get restitution, and this was many years ago, was over $1.5 million at that time, right? It's much more now. And they actually wrote into New York State law, this is in the budget now, because before it was just this line item that they could erase, anytime that they had a problem with policy or, they needed to balance the budget. So they wrote it into the New York State budget in perpetuity right now to fund E-MDT programs across the state, because at the time it was only in New York City and the 7-county region here that I was covering. So in 2017, they said, okay, first we're going to expand to 14 counties. Oh, it went really well. They said, no, now you need to expand it to the whole state, because other people across the state were getting mad that they weren't having the same access to services. And so Brittany's going to talk about how we have expanded the geriatric psychiatry services, because if you remember in my original slide, the enhancement was a forensic accountant and geriatric psychiatrist. And since we don't have a lot of geriatric psychiatry services in this state, we had a hard time. I can only go to so many places because it was mostly me. And now that Brittany's around, we have been able to expand, and she's going to talk about it.
Great, thank you for filling that in. That slide snuck up on me. I don't think it was in that order before. But so now we are set to cover 50 E-MDT programs. I now cover 28 of these programs, so they're all on Zoom. So my role in this, I see as they can always send me records ahead of time to review, medical psychiatric records, give recommendations maybe on what they can do for resources. But a big piece of E-MDT to me is providing that education to all of these different groups of people. Like, what is capacity? What are thresholds for capacity for different decisions? And really clarifying that capacity for one decision is not a blanket statement for not having capacity for all of the things. And something that we also designed in terms of research is every 6 months, we are going to send each of these counties a survey. I think it's a 10-question survey that we had made, asking them what's going right, what's not going well, what could we be doing better. And also something that a lot of the counties have asked for are different just short lectures on what capacity means, what dementia means. So hopefully with that background and information, they can better serve communities and be better at catching things and knowing what's going on. And then I think I'm going to hand this back to Dr. Santos.
So I'm just going to wrap our part up by saying that right now we're a young program, the Geriatric Forensic Psychiatry program. We have great expectations about what our program will be doing in terms of in terms of research, with some support from clinical services. But we are using this template, so I want you all to absorb this and see where it fits into your world, because everything that we do, there's lots of different kind of funding mechanisms, a lot of different areas that we are trying to make change through research. We will be holding up to this light to see where does it fit within our program in terms of how it affects not only our individual patients, but I mean, we are excited about what we can do for the society at large, really. We have the incredible opportunity here at the University of Rochester to make change in terms of social justice because of the forethought of Dr. Kane, Dr. Cerulli, all the LIVE people, our long program of collaboration within the area. I was just at the Group for the Advancement of Psychiatry meeting last week, and everybody asked, well, how do you get these things done? And it's because we're in Rochester, and we don't fight each other about things. We are supportive. We are after the same goal, to create change for our world, right? Not just to make a buck and to find the latest pharmaceutical and to to elevate ourselves. So our research program is designed to make change based on how we can impact all of these areas. So one of the reasons we were very excited as a team to come and talk with you today is so that you guys can, open your minds to this idea and really help us help you guys and the rest of our region. So thanks very much for inviting us.
All right, well, thank you all. That was very interesting. I know I knew nothing about this program, and it's great to see the history and how it's developed. It's really been in the works for quite a long time and growing recently. So we have questions. First, does anyone in the room have a question right now before I get to the other questions? Yeah.
So just to start off, you're obviously all super passionate about what you do. It's really evident. So awesome. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. So the question I had was, Brittany, I heard you saying that you have an expectation that everyone's going to require a capacity. I don't think I needed that, but okay. A capacity evaluation that a lot of times it's like the contact through the E-MDTs, and there's resource allocation. There's some discussions about that. So I guess my question is, as this project kind of moves forward, is there a hope or expectation that the different counties that you cover kind of ingrain themselves with the different resources? Like maybe you're teaching a lot at the beginning about what people might need, and then if that need dies down because people, the systems are in place, people know what they have in place, is there another direction that you expect to go with that resource that maybe you're front loading now with just getting people connected to what they need that they didn't know existed before?
Is this on now? Feels like I'm at a model UN. But that's a good question. I haven't actually thought that far. I know I haven't in advance. I'm hoping that we can give all of the E-MDT teams tools so they can maybe end up doing a lot of things on their own. Because at the end, something I didn't bring up is at the end of every E-MDT meeting, I did make a template and a certain structure, so every coordinator gets a written out statement of what we talked about, and then there's some educational guidance at the bottom of each one. So yeah, I haven't really thought about what happens if they're all successful. That would be
And
great.
I would tell you that because the Monroe County one that I sit on, I've been sitting on it we celebrate our 10th anniversary, May 10th, actually. And they have learned. We work in a little bit of a different way than the newer ones because I've done lectures on dementia and what capacity is and what strokes do to you and, different functional assessments, right? And so they take that into the community, and there are resources that have been created by the Monroe County Office of the Aging, that just weren't in existence before, right? And so what's really great about the work that Brittany's doing with all the other 28 counties is that they will learn what they need, right? They will grow and adapt their services to the local area because what works in Monroe County is not going to work in Seneca County, and it's not going to work in Schuyler, and it's just that we don't have the same resources. And so because we've tried that before, right? We've said this is the gold standard, this is what you need to do, and then they try to translate that, and they don't have the people, they don't have the resources, they don't have the money. So everything has to be really individualized to that county situation, and that is an expectation of E-MDT, and that's why New York State is funding it.
And I think the question's great too, because we've talked some about the research portfolio that we hope to have. So right now we're very much in the building stage. You're gonna see a lot of needs assessment, but Brittany's been very, I don't think she highlighted enough how thoughtful she's been about serving the participants, but also collecting the data. So her assessment that she fills out is organized in a way that we'll be able to, for now, use kind of as like a touch point. But I think the long-term hope is to have some kind of more robust evaluation research design. So I think your question gets us excited about that. We're just not quite there yet, but.
And actually having Corey, she doesn't talk about this though, having an attorney on our team is very different, right? Because they don't, I've done talks with the Bar Association. They listen to her in a different way they listen to me, right? It's a different language, right? And so when we are looking for funding, because a lot of the initial research in this area was actually legal. If you look at all the stuff from the 80s, really, it's all legal research. What does elder abuse mean, right? How do we prosecute? It's all that stuff. And that's why we could not move any of this research forward without having an attorney on the team.
I love how this has evolved, and the collaboration is just spectacular, and it's going to be increasingly, I think, useful, especially as you get into this a little bit more. My guess at a clinical level is that you will be discovering things that you will then need to have referrals back to some of your to your stakeholders. What happens if you find abuse, right? So to your point, EJ, comes the idea that, Corey, you may have then an in a different way, right? Yeah. What happens then if you find somebody that has some medical issues, who's been referred to you by a non-medical provider? Do you link back to the patient's medical provider, or how do you then handle those treatment recommendations in that regard?
So that actually has happened before, for sure, because I've actually been doing these assessments outside of, our U of R capacity clinic, and we will make recommendations to people. We will say, okay, you need to have follow-up with this. You need to have, the capacity clinic itself is a consultation service, right? But we will give follow. Let me say this. The reason we had to work with billing and compliance that Corey talked about is because, well, one, to make it sustainable so that people aren't getting, a bill they have to pay out of pocket. This is a medical service, and so as such you have to have a medical referral. So your primary care physician needs to send the referral so they know about it. So it's just like a regular consultation. We send a whole report back to them. What's different about it, we will also send a report to APS if they're working with them, or to the attorneys who are working with them, so it's a much more broad thing. And as Dr. Mott said, we don't look for one thing. We may get a capacity evaluation referral because they need to change their POA, because the POA that they have now is abusing exploiting them. But if we find out that somebody is not managing their diabetes, right, or they're not taking their medication, they have bruises on themselves, it's going to create another cascade of events that we will help move forward. And our capacity clinic is not open just to E-MDTs, by the way. These are parallel processes. The E-MDTs will be able to refer if they don't have services in their area. We did not create this only for the E-MDTs. We actually created this. There is a medical legal collaborative. I don't know if you guys know about this. It's primarily driven by at AC5 in our medical primary care services, and they're working with like Law New York and the ethics committee here at the University of Rochester. Any capacity evaluations that you do in the hospital, right, or that people need in primary care can come to us as long as they have the order from primary care, right? And so it's not, the E-MDTs, yes, they will send us some, but I expect actually that a lot of the things are going to come from referrals from primary care.
And I think that it's in line with some of our research goals and hypotheses that this will improve connection to resources and improve health and improve legal advocacy. So it's very exciting for us.
Okay, so a question from one of our Zoom attendees is, what's the youngest age for referral?
We have not made a specific age cutoff. To be honest with you, most of our referrals we're expecting to be 60 and over. Because they are individualized, we are, when the referral comes to us, Corey actually and one of our social workers from memory care will be going through everything and get collateral information. So it could be a vulnerable adult who is much younger that we possibly see.
No kids, though. Correct.
Oh yeah, no, it has to be over.
children.
It has to be an adult, by the way. Yes, we're not
Just
doing
wanted to
capacity evaluations
clarify
for
that. No
children.
kids.
That's a different world. Yeah.
Okay, so another question is, I guess it's a two-part question. So, to what extent is this like a binary decision that someone has capacity or doesn't have capacity, or is the idea really more to find out in ways they need support? That's part A. And then part B, I guess, is, are you linked with any services that try to restore capacity through either medication, cognitive rehabilitation, other psychosocial interventions?
So I'm going to answer this question with it depends. So, I mean, I think it depends on what the question for capacity is. So there's different thresholds for capacity for certain decisions. So with medical decision-making, it's like, do you know what's going on? What medical issues do you have? And then if you go over to, let's say, making a will, you have to know what you actually have, who it would naturally go to. So there's different thresholds. So yes, different criteria are needed. And then the second piece of, I think the question was, we do try to divert capacity evaluations if people can fix things. So I think one of the examples I gave is certain medications can impair cognitive functioning, so we can assess that. And if someone has active depressive symptoms, active anxiety symptoms, active psychotic symptoms, all of those things can also impair cognition. So that's why the assessment is pretty comprehensive and thorough to try to treat those. So that might be one of the treatment recommendations, trying to improve someone's ability to regain the ability to make certain decisions. Does that answer that question?
That's a perfect answer.
Solid. Next one.
Okay, so it looks like everything else is clear to everyone in the audience and on Zoom. So I want to thank everyone for coming today, and for those of you who observed this on Zoom, I want to thank our presenters for telling us about this interesting program, and I do look forward to hearing more about, as this evolves over the next couple of years. We'll have you back for sure. And thank you to our interpreters, as always. And I hope everyone has a good day.